Valentina was on call at the hospital. When the alarms went off, it was her turn to work the night shift. When she looked out the window, she realized there was no more time to waste. The story you'll hear actually occurred a few months ago in Chile. The person who told the story shared a personal experience with us. This is, without a doubt, a tragic story that could happen to anyone. Valentina was a teenager in her senior year of high school in 1995. She'd fallen in love with a boy at the time, but she unfortunately used him and went abroad with her family. We'll find out her entire story at the end of the video, but first, like and share it with others, and make sure you're subscribed and have the notifications bell turned on. She suspected she was pregnant 2 months after the relationship ended in the middle of the school year. She was extremely concerned and in a situation she'd never expected to be in the first place. She was at a loss for what to do and had no idea how she was going to tell her parents. In reality, they were adamant in their admittance. This was not a smart idea, but there was no way to get away with it. Sooner or later, they were going to find out. The friend brought her the test the next day. Valentina hoped it was all a misunderstanding and nothing more. However, this was not the case. Her outcome was favorable and she couldn't decide whether to be happy or sad that day. She was aimlessly walking down the streets of Valdivia, committing crimes, but afterwards she felt a surge of strength and told herself that she was going to have to face this and have this little one. Shortly after, she finally arrived at her destination. Valentina cried as she asked her mom what's the matter with her, expecting a child. Valentina recalls her mother slapping her across the face and told her that she can't make jokes about this matter. She stated unequivocally that she was not joking, and the door opened at that precise moment. It was her father who spoke to her. What exactly is going on here? The mothers announced to her husband that their daughter was expecting a child. What exactly is it? What are they saying, though? He said. Is what your mother says true, daughter? Valentina recalls her parents becoming enraged that day and telling her that the best thing she could do was have an abortion. Accompany her the next day, they were not okay with all of this and told her that she was a disgrace to the family. Valentina was awakened the next day by her mother. They boarded the bus early in the morning. Valentina was terrified as she recalls that it was a particularly bad moon, raining and bitterly cold. They arrived in Los Lagos, a small town, after a 2-hour ride. When they walked into a house, there was a man who seemed to be a doctor. Valentina claims that she examined some diplomas and discovered that he had a medical degree. He was a middle-aged man and he told her that he was only going to look into it. He went to a small office, however, he told them that there's something they should be aware of. Abortion is a very dangerous procedure, and her daughter is only a young lady. She's likely to become sterile after an abortion, meaning she'll never be able to have children again. It's advised that she keep the baby, give birth to it, and then place it for adoption. Her parents didn't want people to find out, but is that what she wants? Isn't Willa gonna want it, Valentina? The adolescent simply lowered his head. She could tell she was being coerced. The doctor simply refused to do it because she's only an adolescent and he doesn't want to burden her with that guilt. They were able to return home, and Valentina felt very sad to learn how her parents were acting. As if fate had been on her side, when they got home, her parents told her that she was going to have the baby, but that once the baby was born, she would have to give it up for adoption. After a while, time passed. To be precise, 8 months and 2 weeks. Valentina was giving birth in the hospital, but thankfully everything went smoothly. And the nurse described the baby as beautiful. The girl caught a glimpse of him, but only for a split second. Her mother appeared shortly after and demanded that she sign a document relinquishing her maiden name. Her mother had brought a piece of paper with her, so she instructed her to sign the document, and Valencia was well aware of what it was, and she refused to accept it. However, her mother warned her that if she didn't do it, she wouldn't be able to enter the house again. But she didn't want her son to suffer as a result of her actions, and she figured it'd be a better environment for both of them. The only thing she recalls is that he had a mole on his skin, which she had as well. Her mother handled all the paperwork necessary to break up her from her son from her own grandson. Valentina fell into a deep depression and was unable to reunite with her son no matter how hard she tried. She was not successful. She had no idea where he'd been taken and had no information. Valentina recounts her father telling her that things would change from now on. If she makes the same mistake, she'll be forced to leave their home and they will not be able to pay for education. They told her that she must mature and begin again from the beginning, and her son is going to be fine. It's time for her to move on, according to her parents. And so the years went by. Valentina figured out how to move on. She began college and graduated with honors. She was even awarded a scholarship to pursue a master's degree and was a medical student. Of course, she thought about that son from time to time. Will he be okay, she wondered? What's he doing now? Is he going to be close or far away? She considered looking for him on occasion, but she was afraid of what would happen if she did. She was on the verge of doing so on numerous occasions. She married and had a daughter after finishing her career and getting a job in a hospital in the capital, and she never revealed anything about her past to her husband. She was fine because she didn't want him to know what she had gone through. At first glance, they appeared to be a happy family. However, after a few years, something very unexpected occurred. It was the winter of 2019 at the time. Valentina had arrived at the hospital for a regular shift. One day, she awoke at 2 a.m. to the sound of her phone ringing. A medical emergency had arrived and they require her presence in the operating room. Valentina looked out the window at the time and felt something strange. He noticed how the paramedics were carrying an injured person. It was the first time she'd experienced such intense fear. So she dashed to the scene where they informed her that he had been run over and must act quickly. Valentina approached the young man at that moment, and when she saw him, that strange feeling grew stronger. She had the sensation that time had stopped, but that time was gold. As a result, she acted quickly. The boy had a bare chest, and when she saw him, she noticed a mole on his skin that reminded her of someone she knew. She had it as well, and it reminded her a lot of her father. Fortunately, the young man resisted the operation, but he was still being monitored. The doctor stayed with him for a few minutes longer before being called away to see another patient. Valentina then inquired about the young man's name. She was interested in learning more about him. And as strange as it seemed, the boy shared her surname. So she went into the hospital computer and discovered in the file that the young man had previously visited the facility and was from an orphanage. The whole thing took the woman by surprise and she couldn't believe it. Valentina recalls the incident as if it were yesterday. She went into the computer and looked for any records of him, and she found a lot of them and also had access to that information because she worked in a state hospital. She was trembling because she thought he was unmistakably her son. When she returned, a nurse had emerged from the intensive care unit where he was being treated, and she just informed her that the patient had died. He didn't survive, and she couldn't believe her eyes. So she entered by opening the door. There were some colleagues nearby with resuscitation devices, and she just stared at how lifeless her son was. A doctor approached her and said, "Poor guy, he didn't fight back and he was raised in an orphanage. He didn't have any parents or siblings. Who will shed a tear for him?" She staggered and almost fainted at that point. But she grabbed the table next to her and saw him when she heard those words. Who will shed a tear for him? She was alone with that young man at the time, and she cried like she'd never cried before because he was her son. Then she discovered that the person who ran him over had fled. He was celebrating his college graduation, had too much to drink, and apparently didn't notice the approaching car. On the other hand, she discovered that her suspicions were correct. He lived in a hostel in the country's north until he was 18 years old. Then he went to the capital to study. With the university, the state aided him. He was a good young man and had good grades and a bright future ahead of him. And even though his life was cut short, perhaps if she hadn't given him up for adoption, he would have been happier and wouldn't have had to go through this. He died when he was 24 years old. Since then, she's avoided talking about her parents. In fact, she was always resentful of them. They're quite old now, but she won't be able to see them again, and was not sure if she was doing the right thing. They took a piece of her life away. They shattered her fantasy of being a mother when she had to be the one. She was also filled with guilt and should have been more assertive. Who knows how many times he required her assistance and support? Who knows how many times he sobbed and questioned why she had abandoned him? Perhaps he was looking for her. Perhaps he was aware of her existence. However, she wasn't sure about all this. His life, just like hers, came to an end. Even though she had a daughter and a husband, nothing is the same as it was before. And she was filled with remorse. And with that, Valentina's story came to an end. A story that could have taken a different path and ended differently. Nowadays, life can surprise us at the most unexpected times. When their children make mistakes, many parents punish them. That's incorrect, because one is human. Mistakes should not be punished, and we're often carried away by the moment, whatever it may be. What her parents should have done from the start was to be there for her, because they're now able to push not only their grandson, but also their daughter away. What are your thoughts on this story, friends? How is this even possible? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comment section. That concludes today's discussion. Make sure your browser's notification bell is turned on. Hopefully you'll keep it in mind at all times. We'll talk to you soon, and we bid you farewell.